Welcome everyone again. Officially call the public meeting, public session to order. We have minutes, of course, in front of us to approve. One item agenda, which we'll spend quite a bit of time on, and the usual updates from Chris. So I guess the first item of business is the approval of the minutes. They were circulated. I hope people have had a chance to look at them from our last meeting. Is there any comments, revisions, questions? Nothing? Could someone move a motion and a seconder then to approve the minutes?
I'll move.
Yeah. Okay, Eric and David. Okay, thank you. Okay. The one item.
Can we call back in
yes.
Emily and
oh, yes, please.
Jenna?
I'm back.
Are you back?
Oh, great.
Great. Okay, welcome back. We're officially in public session now. We just approved the minutes, so the day's agenda, Destination Playground Pavilion, here for issues ID, so there'll be no vote, but it's a good opportunity to, provide feedback and input into it at this early stage. Is there anyone who wants to declare a conflict?
I want to declare conflict.
Yeah, Jana?
Yep.
Okay. And anyone else?
I guess Emily, if she's come back on, I don't know if she's gotten back on yet.
She's not on yet.
Emily not on yet? I think we can note that she.
Well, I think we'll note that Emily, because she's doing the landscape for that project,
okay.
has a conflict.
Okay, no one else? Great. Okay, updates, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Leon, do you want to? Actually, I guess.
Oh, there she is.
Leon and I are both going to do the project updates. So Parliament Slip came for Issues ID in April. We got a lot of feedback. We've already had a debrief with the team, and we're going to take several of the suggestions into a study. So we're going to look at shifting the pools to the east side and south, closer to the water's edge, and putting the service building then on the west side, so doing that flip. That was one thing the panel suggested. I don't think we're going to look at moving the pools to block 5, which was suggested. I think that is a layer of complication too many for us, but we are going to look at the other flip. And we're going to look at the sizing and number of the concession buildings and the size of the pier to consider the crowding issue that I think was raised by the panel. We're going to think about whether that large floating restaurant that's sort of south of the channel and at the end of Keating needs to shift to have to make sure that there is a stronger relationship between the slip and the Keating channel. We may even propose some programmatic elements in the Keating channel. For example, maybe the wetlands that we were thinking about may wrap around, or we may not do wetlands in Parliament Slip. Maybe we'll do them in the Keating instead. So all of those things have been kind of raised and discussed with the design team, and we have a design workshop planned for June to hopefully think through all of these issues and come up with an approach, and then come back to the panel in September. Next slide, please, Leon.
Yep.
Am I doing this one, or do you want me to do this one, or are you doing this one?
Sure, Chris. I think you can do this one.
So I think we mentioned on the tour that we've actually made some changes to Queens Quay West, or we are in the midst of making them. Really what they're aimed at is clarifying some of the pedestrian cyclist interface. So the image on the right shows you what we're planning to do. What happens today in that drawing is that right by that blue stop box, the asphalt ends, and everything to the right of it is the red granite, which is what was creating the quote-unquote mixing zone where bikes and peds were supposed to mix. The problem with that has always been that the bikes actually have a signalized intersection now, and so they think when they have a green, they have the free right of way, and the pedestrians should be cleared off. The bike signal is sort of the way of the future of bike lanes in Toronto, so that's not something we're going to take away. So what we're doing instead is we're going to extend that asphalt right to the driveways, which are also, understood by people as a roadway, and extend the pedestrian striping south across the Goodman Trail and move the pedestrian signal call button from the north side of the bike trail to the south side of the bike trail so that people will wait south of the Martin Goodman Trail, press the button, and then get a walk signal to walk all the way across. Whereas today they had to cross the trail, press the button, and wait between the trail and the TTC tracks, which was also problematic because it's not a very wide zone and it would get overfilled with people and they would spill right onto the TTC right of way. So these conflicts were having multiplier effects and slowing down all the modes and giving some pedestrians a sense of it being unsafe. Statistically, it's still very safe. There haven't really been very many incidents, but people are afraid there's going to be one. So this change, we think, may make the street feel more comfortable for people. We're piloting this, I think, at 2 intersections only, and we're going to see if it actually has the intended improvement or not. And if it does, then we'll probably do this in all of the intersections. So it's not a huge change. It's just continuing the asphalt and moving the pedestrian call.
Is the asphalt slightly raised?
I think that's a shadow being cast by the safety fence. It's not. It's got the same relationship that it does everywhere else. Yeah. So, and the other thing we're doing is we're creating a planted buffer between the streetcar tracks and the Martin Goodman Trail. And that, again, is because pedestrians have been walking in that zone, which was paved with the rough split-face cobble, which we thought was going to dissuade people from walking there, but it has absolutely made no difference in people's walking on it. So it was a failed queue. So we're going to plant that with some sort of woody shrubs to discourage people, again, from wandering onto the TTC tracks, which they have been doing. And because of that, the TTC cars are on a permanent go slow order, which is not something the TTC likes and causes a lot of stress for the TTC drivers because they're constantly afraid a pedestrian's just going to step out in front of them. So, and this is also a pilot. We're just doing this in one segment to see if it alters behavior or if Toronto pedestrians are just going to trample right through the woody shrubs and wander onto the TTC tracks anyway, which is sort of an open question. Toronto pedestrians kind of go anywhere, so we don't know if it's going to work or not. But if it does work, then we would consider rolling it out across the whole street.
It's a statistical question.
Yes.
Well, how many of them will? Obviously a few for sure, but as long as you discourage the majority, you will have succeeded, or at least you'll have done your best.
It'll become a judgment call on TTC's part as to whether or not they lift the go slow order.
Right.
Because of course, pedestrians can wander onto TTC tracks anywhere in the city, and I'm sure it happens occasionally, but in more normative situations like Spadina, where it's in its own right of way, they don't have to have a permanent go slow order. So we want them to feel operationally that they can lift it, and if they feel that way, then we'll have succeeded.
I've written a whole book about how people in public are distracted, and so you're right in my territory. And basically what you're doing is adjusting subconscious expectations, and it's a subtle business, but it's things are possible. So.
Yeah, well, and I will tell you that Audrey and the designer of the street did not like this idea of putting planted
you told us that already.
Yeah, so
they're concerned about the narrow width of the strip, I think. Right.
Yeah, and I think it's as much from a design perspective as it is from plant survivability. I think he just feels like it's a meager little planted strip that looks kind of meaningless, and it may urbanistically, but if you
put the right plant material.
That's what I'm hoping.
Stuff robust.
I think we're trying a few different plants too in this pilot strip. So, okay.
Dog resilient plants.
What's that?
Dog resilient plants, because that's what you're going to have.
Yeah.
You're going to have everybody.
You're walking their dogs there, yeah. Well, that's why I think we're going to do shrubs that are hopefully
The
not so
spiky one.
easy to walk into. Yeah, well, maybe raspberry bushes or something.
My dog doesn't care. I yell him still, dude.
Okay.
All right, Leon, do you want to do the next?
Yeah, so a bit of an update on York Street Park's construction progress. Last month, we saw that the pond retaining wall was under construction. We showed footage of the Shot Creek being sprayed. It is now completed. You can really read the kind of full outline of the heart quite well. The mechanical room north of the park, you can see in the plan there, has also been excavated, and now they are laying the pipes that would connect the pond with the room. Also, some exciting progress on the pond edge coping. The mock-up is under progress in the shop, and they're testing the just the red tiles and also the grout, laying that out over the curved precast section.
So there'll be precast section and then put in place.
Yeah, it's a precast curved cap, and then they actually lay the tile on that once all those precast pieces have been put around the perimeter.
So for next month, we have also a light agenda. 1 to 7 Yonge Street, Phase 4 and 5, they are confirmed to come back to the DRP for detailed design review. So to remind you, this is the Pinnacle development that Hari Pontarini is designing. At the corner of the site is of course the Toronto Star building. They came for schematic design last time. We discussed a lot about the lower podium, the public realm. So this time we will focus on the architectural design a little more, and also take a vote. And we will also have an in-camera session on the DRB Awards. So that probably will be a longer discussion. And it is likely going to be a full day meeting. Okay.
So nothing else? We were actually 15 minutes ahead of schedule.
All right,
Unless,
look at us.
Yeah, nothing else.
Want to take a break, or if there's anything else you want to try and cover?
I don't think there's anything else. Yeah.
No, I guess not.
Yeah.
Do you have any,
I guess while we're still in public
words
session,
of wisdom you want to share with us in public?
Not words of wisdom. I can just remind everybody that this session is being recorded and will be posted on the Waterfront Toronto website. Welcome back in public session, and dealing with the one item on our agenda, Destination Playground Pavilion, here for issues identification. So lots of opportunity to share our feedback and comment, and there will not be a vote at this stage. And Tina, I believe you're going to do an introduction for us?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay, take it away.
Tristan, are you able to put the slides up? Yeah, I guess before we get started, are Jana and Emily off the call?
Yeah, I just removed our, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, good afternoon, everyone. I think everybody knows me, but for those of you who don't, my name's Pina Malazzi. I'm the Vice President for Design here at Waterfront Toronto, and have been working on the Portland's Flood Protection Project for quite some time now. I'm joined by my colleague Tristan Simpson, who's actually the project manager for this, and she will present at subsequent DRPs, and many other colleagues from across the organization covering different aspects of the project that we're looking at today. I'll provide a brief introduction to the Park Pavilion and Winter Garden at Promontory Park. And while this project, as we heard, is currently unfunded, we are creating a vision for it to support our fundraising efforts and are here today for issues identification. I'm going to start by introducing the project team. Today, the presentation will be given both by Herb Sweeney from Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, who's the team captain for the larger Portland's Flood Protection Project, and by Drew Adams from Levitt Goodman Architects. As everyone knows, Jana, who is actually leading the design of this pavilion, is on the design review panel and therefore has conflict and will not participate in today's discussion. From Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, we have representation from Lori Ellis, David O'Hara, Mark Kramer, and John Keane. Next slide, Tristan. The Pavilion and Winter Garden are proposed to be located in Promontory Park South. Promontory Park South is one of the components of the larger Portland's Flood Protection Park system. What you're seeing here on the screen is the existing conditions. The Pavilion and Winter Garden are highlighted in red. The site is quite extensive construction endeavor at this moment, as you can see. Next slide. At full build-out, the Winter Garden acts as a gathering place in the new park system. It is located at the Trinity Street entrance into the park, and the pavilion, located just to the west of the Winter Garden, nestles into the landscape of the currently unfunded destination playground, which you see in the pink tone in the drawing on the screen. Other adjacent uses to the Winter Garden and Pavilion include Canoe Cove to the south, the event lawn to the west, which is the lighter shade of green in the drawing, and the Promontory, which is immediately to the west of the Winter Garden and Pavilion. It is intended to accompany another amenities building within the Portland's Flood Protection Project. There is an amenities building which is being constructed. Well, it's a historical fire hall 30, that is being relocated and retrofitted as part of the Portland's Flood Protection Project. We will deliver a series of restrooms at the fire hall building, as well as some basic fit out to allow for community uses in that amenities building. Next slide. So just to give a little bit of project background, through the development of the design of the parks at the Portland's Flood Protection Project, it was identified that a second facilities building should be included in Promontory Park South, and that this was a desirable use. Programming for the pavilion was identified through a series of workshops that we held with Parks, Forestry, and Recreation staff. We were trying to really respond to what we all believe to be the park user needs within the larger PLFP project, as well as PFNR staff needs. The pavilion program is proposed to include washrooms, a food concession, and flexible areas for PFNR camp programs and other recreational programs that PFNR may run within the larger Portland's flood protection projects. Promontory Park South will be delivered as part of the PLFP project, and for the most part is funded, with the exception of the two components I noted, the destination playground and the pavilion that we're speaking about today. And the Winter Garden was really intended as an extension of the pavilion to allow for year-round activation within the park, and really a meetup place year-round within the Portland's Flood Protection Project. Next slide. From a timeline perspective, because the project's unfunded, it's a bit in flux, but we are here today for Issues ID, and we are intended to complete our schematic design phase, and we'll return to the design review panel between either in July of this year or in September of this year, with the intention to get to a detailed design phase sometime in 2023. If all goes well and we're successful at our fundraising initiatives, we would be tendering the project in 2024 and completing the project in 2026. That's all subject to funding. Next slide. So as I said, the pavilion architect is Levitt Goodman Architects. They are actually working as a sub-consultant to Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, who is the lead designer for the Portland's Flood Protection Project, and is will design the winter garden as part of this process. Next slide. And as I mentioned, we're in the issues ID phase with the intention of returning to the panel for schematic design later this year. And just to wrap up, as this is the issues ID phase for the project, the feedback today will really inform that schematic design that we bring forward later this year. The team will be presenting and looking for feedback on the proposed program, the integration of the building with the adjacent winter garden and their larger park context, initial concepts around, or initial concepts and approaches around the form of the building, the sustainability approach and materiality. So I look forward to sort of hearing feedback in those areas. And I think with that, I turn it over to Herb, who's going to provide an introduction to the site context and the Promontory Park design, and then over to Drew to speak to the pavilion specifically.
Great, thank you, Pina. Share screen. Bear with me 1 minute. All right. As Pina noted, I'm Herb Sweeney from I'm the team captain, and we've engaged LGA architectural partners on this project, and Drew will be presenting the second half of the presentation. So we're excited to be bringing to you all today the Park Pavilion and Winter Garden part of this project. It's been, I guess, quite a few years at this point since I was last in front of you all, of the panel, to talk about the Portland's project, and there's been a lot of progress relative to construction. What we're looking at here is the project site is the pink boundary that sits within some of that excavated soil that's been coming out of the new naturalized river channel. And the entire site extents that we're discussing here today would be about a half-acre parcel within Promontory Park South on the left side of this image. So just as context, in 2024, the Portland's project will have delivered the park spaces associated with Promontory Park South, River Valley Park North and South, and then what's in the lighter green, less saturated color, would be all of the new naturalized River Valley system that's being delivered with the Portland's project, in addition to the new realigned Cherry Street, Commissioner Street, and the new bridges associated with the infrastructural improvements. So as part of the issues identification discussion that we're looking to have today, we really identified about 3 big questions for this work. And first being, what is the vision for Promontory Park South? How is the pavilion and the winter garden integrated into the PLFP project? And then lastly, how can a pavilion support the Promontory playground and the overall PLFP project? Beginning with the first question related to the vision of Promontory Park South, similar to Toronto's other large urban parks, the Portland's Flood Protection Project has the unique opportunity to be engaged with a significant natural resource. And as part of our efforts here, we're really looking at a park that delivers a vision that is integrated and focuses on the reconnection of the Don Valley with Lake Ontario. The work that MVVA has been doing with Waterfront Toronto and stakeholder involvement over the last 15 years hasn't been solely about flood protection, but also looking at how to create a resilient and experientially rich park system that looks at the future developments and the neighborhoods that will bring along another 25,000 or so residents and workers into this area. and looks to respond accordingly. As part of the park programming that we've discussed in previous DRPs, Promontory Park South is envisioned as being an area of uses that are higher in intensity. And as we make our way through the park system, thinking about the wide range of diverse programming types, those activities, those spaces become less intensive as you move up the river channel and more focused on immersion in nature and the recreation of that habitat that once occupied the site. In Promontory Park South, some of those activities that we're constructing at this point are like the event lawn that Pina noted, which can support up to 2,000 to 3,000 people for performances, as well as the area that's in the more saturated pink color, which would be where the playgrounds are envisioned that will be drawing visitors in from the Greater Toronto area. Other types of uses that are planned for Promontory Park South include more passive use type lawn areas, lawns that can act as a spillover for play that either comes out of the playgrounds or has some other programming associated with it. There's the Canoe Cove, the naturalized edge of Promontory Park South, which abuts the edge of the pavilion site that we're talking about today. In addition to some of the naturalized conditions, that forest frame that we're extending from the river valley up through the promontory. Back one slide. Aerial view gives you a sense of kind of the complexity of those landscape types throughout Promontory Park South, beginning with we're floating above the edge of the harbor here, looking over the Esplanade to the high point of the promontory, the landform, and the event lawn on the left. And then deeper in this image would be the playground area supported by the new pavilion and the winter garden that we're talking about. One important layer to consider relative to the context of the site would be the art program that's planned for the project. And there's a series of both temporary and permanent art pieces that are being considered along a trail that extends through the promontory that would have a permanent art piece associated with the pavilion and then connects through the rest of the park system. Another really important part of the design that is also ongoing would be relative to the indigenous design approach for the project. And MVVA team has led a series of indigenous community group engagements. And as part of that process, the feedback that we've received has informed several aspects of the PLFP project, including the planting approach, including other features that are going to be continue to be expanded upon and constructed as part of this project. And in particular, we'd be looking at how to integrate some of that feedback with the winter garden, with the plaza space, in addition to the pavilion as we advance that work. We don't have a series of existing conditions of context because by the time this project is constructed, the adjacent projects of the adjacent project areas of Promontory Park South will be built. So this image would be the context for the park at the very north end. So where you enter off of Center Street, looking down across that event lawn and out to the harbor beyond. This view would be at the southeast corner of the site where you enter the park system from New Cherry Street, looking down to the Canoe Cove on the right-hand side of the image. You can catch a glimpse of the Atlas crane up through the trees on the left. This view is looking back north. So we're looking up towards the promontory. Part of the stone wall system that is stabilizing the edge, the southern edge of the promontory walls, and the project site would be off to the right beyond the Canoe Cove that you can catch a glimpse of in this view. And then this last view of the proposed conditions would be a view along Trinity. So we're looking back west to the playground. The pavilion here is shown. This was one of the early renderings from a year or so ago about an idea for the pavilion and how it would have some visual connection to the elbow, to the corner of Trinity where it turns north around the future Villiers Island precinct. And you can catch a glimpse of some of the mixed use that's anticipated at the ground floor level that would be immediately adjacent to our project site. But these are the conditions today. So this is looking at construction progress as of a month ago. And you can see the relationship of the pink area of our site that we're looking at here to the edge of the canoe cove. So high lake level will be about a meter or so below the finished grade elevations that we're looking at for the Winter Garden Plaza. Also on this image is the context of how close we are to Cherry Street Bridge South, the new edge of the realigned Cherry Street. And Commissioner Street extends down and really terminates at the end of our project site before it turns north on Trinity. So that excavation that occurred in the Canoe Cove, it's what has created a fill condition for the promontory and thus the namesake for the park. So as part of balancing that cut fill, we're also creating opportunities to help make more pleasant spaces in the winter months and really the shoulder seasons of the park. So that landform provides some shelter from the winter winds that come from the northwest, west kind of direction. And that has also informed the location of where the park pavilion and this winter garden is placed. So taking advantage of the topography that we're creating for the playground and using that as an opportunity to embed the park pavilion and create an additional shelter, windbreak for that exterior space that would support the pavilion. In embedding the pavilion into the topography, really integrating it into the landscape, that creates a unique opportunity to have circulation extend from the playground directly up on top and create access to the top of the park, the pavilion roof. That links into the playground network of trails, allowing for AODA access up to the top of the roof without the need of stairs. Additionally, it's important to note that the park pavilion sits on the main park path, the hallway path, which is the red thick line that links Promontory Park South down under Cherry Street Bridge and into River Valley Park North. The close proximity of the pink line of Trinity Boulevard allows for easy access from both the future LRT that comes down Cherry Street that's shown in blue, as well as the Martin Goodman Trail, the bike multi-use trail that is shown in green here. In siting this building at this moment of Promontory Park South, it really creates a centralized condition, both on a kind of a micro scale, thinking about the playground itself, where little kids have little legs, and trying to create amenities in close proximity to both ends of the playground is really important for both washrooms, but also for opportunities to gather and eat. And at the same time, it really offers another amenity within kind of a central point for Promontory Park South, but also for the other half of River Valley Park North. And then lastly, about access would be, it's directly off Trinity. So it has close access for any servicing needs down one of those primary connection paths that bisect the playground. And then with the location being so close to the edge of the Canoe Cove, It affords some really amazing panoramic views, looking back down to the Canoe Cove, and then when you're up on that roof deck condition, out across the harbor to the harbor islands, and farther distance upstream up the river channel. So how is the Pavilion and Winter Garden integrated into the PLFP project? Firstly, we're thinking about how this complements what is already planned for River Valley Park North. So looking at the right-hand side of this image, you can see the first pink boundary would be where the Fire Hall 30 Heritage Building is located. And it's envisioned that that building has a plaza that has cafe tables, opportunities to bring a lunch, or potentially that there are vendors located within the first floor, some type of concession, whether it's a coffee shop or other type of food that could serve as opportunity to eat something as you enter the park. At the same time, we have washrooms that are being constructed as part of the base PLFP project within the Fire Hall 30 building. And then as you move eastwards, those would be the large picnic grove areas that have grill stations so people can bring food to grill. They can bring lunch to just picnic. And we see this as a great opportunity at the other end of the park to provide some of those same amenities that we're providing in River Valley Park North. So these images just give you a sense of that character that I described within both the Fire Hall 30 and the Picnic Grove areas. What this pavilion and the Winter Garden is also looking to do is add a new type or expand the type of programming that is offered by the Portlands project. So we're thinking about not only what happens in the summer and the shoulder months, but also what can happen out of this location in the winter months. So there's opportunities to use the pavilion as kind of a central point of departure in the winter months for access to nature trails, for snowshoeing, potentially cross-country skiing when the trails haven't been plowed. It's also opportunity that with the programming planned in the interior, such as the cafe and restaurant opportunities, that we could see outdoor dining and fire pits and other ways to extend the use and bring people in even in the colder months. This diagram gives you a sense of the positioning of the pavilion against the playgrounds again, but also thinking about that trail loop that could start from the pavilion, and it becomes more of a warming station, opportunity to get back, use washrooms, warm up before continuing on with an adventure in the park. At this point, I'm going to release the screen and allow Drew to pick up on the next section.
Thanks, Herb. Hi, everyone. My name is Drew Adams. I'm an associate at LGA Architectural Partners and working very closely with Herb's team and Jana Levitt from our office, who's the partner in charge of this project. The goals and objectives for the pavilion, expanding on what Herb's described, is that the park pavilion will be the architectural corollary of the exemplary new park. With its simple form and expressive timber structure, the public building will provide amenity to all visitors. Embodying principles of regeneration and resilience, the pavilion will be near passive house in its performance with all electric and low carbon systems to maximize energy conservation. And its plant-based material palette will aim to address the need for carbon sequestering and material carbon reductions in a way that complements the natural world of Promontory Park. We began working on this pavilion project by benchmarking a number of pavilion and washroom building examples. These are just a few of those that we were looking at, both looking at scale and size in relation to the park that they're serving, as well as the washroom counts and amenity that they're offering, and the expanded footprint. In the case of Corktown Common, thinking about the building itself, but also a kind of expanded footprint that results from a kind of outdoor canopy situation. Working alongside that, we were investigating arrival and gathering benchmark type spaces, looking at spaces like the Fort York Visitor Center, for example, in terms of its arrival orientation spaces and the meeting space and program space at the Evergreen Brickworks and the Center for Green Cities, as well as looking at spaces like the Family Center at the Assiniboine Park in Winnipeg. We also, in looking and developing the Pavilion building, we were looking at a variety of food service offerings and typologies, from a concession style to cafe style to a fast casual style kitchen space, and working with a food service consultant to examine what the different opportunities and constraints of these types would mean, both spatially, but in terms of also the offerings as it integrates with the park objectives. And in the end, the kind of recommendation here was for a park, a kitchen space like at Cafe Belong at the Evergreen Brickworks in terms of scale and offering. What this has resulted in is a proposed program that we're working with here that is approximately 11 washrooms. Half of those are serving the interior spaces, half of those are directly accessible from the exterior to serve the park as amenity. There is a large park recreation and forestry program space that emerged out of the consultations that Pina was speaking about at the outset, as well as a commercial kitchen and dining space with about 50-person capacity in the indoor dining area, and then a number of ancillary spaces, including things like a first aid room, storage, etc. It's been really exciting also looking for this kind of unique opportunity here at a number of opportunities and considerations that the Pavilion offers, and specifically here on the left, looking at opportunities for the kind of integration and immersion with the landscape and how that Pavilion building itself can contribute and enhance to the topographic moves that MVVA is developing in the park space, as well as in the middle, and in particular the bottom center image, looking at the conditions for the edge of the building, and as that threshold is defined between indoor and outdoor, and opportunities to kind of shape and sculpt the interior environment. And lastly, on the right here, thinking about the canopy and its relation to the extension of the space across the threshold of the envelope, and in ways that starts to define sheltered space at the edge, but might start to also contribute to shading for the building in terms of performance. As we move forward, we also know that there's going to be very key considerations that will need to be given to privacy and the entry and exit of the washrooms themselves, specifically, or in particular, the exterior ones. These images here on the left, a variety of sheltered kind of entry conditions in this example in Tokyo. The space around the building in terms of the amenity for caregivers as they arrive with strollers and whatnot is also another really key consideration that we're going to be working on and focusing as we develop moving forward, and thinking about the robust materiality of these buildings and their long-term durability, and recognizing the need to start to reconcile those objectives with the material selections that are serving the overall kind of carbon objectives and natural material objectives of the project. This is a plan of the ground plane or ground floor of the building and adjoining Winter Garden. So we've got the Winter Garden here in the center, Trinity Boulevard to the top of the slide, Canoe Cove on the right, and the kind of hallway and circulation wrapping around it. In gray is the portion of the hillside that's being cut into. So the back of house program is located adjacent to that. And what you see here along the edge is the emergence of a kind of plane of glass envelope that wraps the building as it emerges from the landscape, and really begins that dialogue and interaction and kind of contribution to the activity and life with the outdoor space of the Winter Garden to kind of create an urban room condition. It's a lot more clear, I think, in this relationship diagram where you see in yellow the program area for Parks Forestry and an arrival orientation space that gives some space for a small group of kind of campgoers or users to gather outside of the building as they arrive. Thinking about the front of house dining and service offering and its relationship to the outdoor dining spaces, both at the very edge of the building and as well in the garden itself. And then on the left here in blue, the washrooms the washrooms that are directly accessible to the exterior, and that space that's going to need a lot of key consideration given to the space and kind of breathing space for people as they wait to use those washrooms. In dark gray is the back of house program located where there's not really that need for daylight and its relationship to the outdoors. So up on the top of the building here, you see in a dash is the footprint below. And we're going to be working as we progress the project to continue to think about and develop this extension of the canopy overhang and start to shape that in a kind of more fulsome way. These paths on the top here and then on the bottom here are those pathways that Herb was describing that have an accessible route up onto the building roof, and where there is these outdoor seating areas and a beginning of the kind of interaction and engagement with the playground space beyond. This is the north-south section with Trinity Boulevard here on the right. So this is entering through the kind of path network and arriving at the building, cutting through the front of house kind of program areas with the mounds of earth mounding up behind it. The perhaps the more interesting section here is the east-west section, which really shows this this immersion of the building in the landscape and this kind of unique engagement that it offers as it steps up from Canoe Cove through the pathway in the Winter Garden to the building itself, with the playground and some outdoor opportunities above. It creates a lot of really interesting opportunities for the integration of the building into the landscape and back, and the reciprocity of these spaces at the edge condition here that will continue to be looked at going forward. Thinking also about the passive sustainability opportunities that this embedment offers in terms of thinking about the mass of earth as it wraps the building, as well as the ability for this overhang to self-shade the building. The down
I think you've got some background noise going on there, Drew.
Did we lose him?
Cut his wire. Cut his wires.
That's particularly lost.
I think he's muted.
Sorry. There is a bit of background noise. I do apologize. They've decided to do some grinding in the space next to ours, adjacent our conference room. But if it continues, I'll move. But I think it stopped for the moment. In the bottom left, there's opportunities that this embedment offers for places of refuge under the canopy and prospect and discovery on top of it, as well as enhancing the terracing up from below. This is a image of our model with Trinity Boulevard at the top, the Winter Garden, Canoe Cove in the bottom right. An overview image of the building. Looking at the building here as you arrive from Trinity Boulevard and starting to recognize the need for really thinking in a very serious way about both the identification of the entry and the signal that sends, as well as that threshold. This is looking up from Canoe Cove through the Winter Garden to the building. The view from the southwest, and in particular this broad side where it's emerging from the landscape, is where a lot of those exterior washroom doors will be, and really points to the need to really think about both the materiality, but how they've also contributed to kind of cohesive identity for the building. Oops. These are some early structural explorations, thinking about the all timber structure above grade, and the way that contributes both to the materiality, but also to the narrative with respect to natural materials and the park itself. And then here on the right, what we've encountered is at this site, we knew the soil would be bad, but unfortunately it is a soil class F, which is the absolute worst, and is driving us to use deep caissons, which is going to challenge some of our sustainability goals, but there's also, with the scale of the building, the opportunity to start to think about those as rammed aggregate piers, potentially. And in terms of the sustainability, we are focused a lot on the material and embodied carbon aspects of the project, recognizing that between now and 2030, the majority of carbon emissions from the building are going to be material and not necessarily energy. and that we're looking to create a kind of more fulsome climate positive building by minimizing that embodied carbon impact first and foremost, and that's driving us to think about the concrete mix design, thinking about supplementary cementitious materials, the opportunity that the building itself presents in terms of having a longer cure time on the concrete and using less cement, given that the building will take less time to construct than the park itself. Thinking about the materials in terms of the structure, the envelope, and looking to start to define opportunities to have a kind of sequestering building where possible. On the other side of the coin, really thinking seriously about the energy and operating carbon. The project is seeking to be a kind of near passive house type project with an all electric systems and low carbon, very low carbon footprint at the end of the day. If it weren't for the kitchen, the project would undoubtedly be able to certify as passive house, but it is, the kitchen is having a very outsized impact on it. And that's also why, while we're meeting the Toronto Green Standard Tier 4 and the Waterfront Toronto Building Standards version 3, we do have an exception on meeting the energy use intensity targets in Teddy, specifically due to the impact of the kitchen. But what that's also driven is the interesting exploration of kitchen strategies, thinking about high efficiency equipment, such as using induction cooking and the elimination of gas cooking in the building, and different types of mechanical systems, such as this compensating hood that is accompanied with infrared sensors that I guess it's ramping up and down based on its need to ventilate, as opposed to a kind of more conventional continuous operation of the hood system. And that's where I'll leave off here, and I'm really welcome and interested in the feedback.
Okay, does that conclude the whole presentation? Yeah, okay. Okay, so I guess we can open it up to questions from the panel first. Who would like to start?
I can start.
George?
I have a couple of questions. I'm used to the term winter garden referring to a greenhouse. Mm-hmm. And so I've been kind of thrown by the use of that terminology here. It's not, I don't mean to suggest I want a greenhouse, but I take it that what we're talking about here is something that's adjacent to the pavilion that accommodates winter eating activities and ancillary stuff. So I could benefit from a clarification here, partly terminological and partly programmatic. That's my first question.
I think I understand where you're coming from with that. And the term winter garden came out of the description of the play areas and a series of garden rooms. And this is another one of those garden rooms. So it's a space embedded within the forest frame. So I think out of context of the other areas of Promontory, it gives a different character, a different feel to it. The programming is focused on winter activities, and that's the reference, but I think that we could certainly clean that up.
Okay, the second one is that I had the impression from the introductory material about the park generally, the context, and from the model, that there's some sort of significant vertical elevation between Canoe Cove and the pavilion, and in particular the pavilion roof. The drawn building sections, on the other hand, left me with the impression that the difference of vertical elevation was not all that great, that the winter garden didn't seem to be very much above the level of the Canoe Cove. Can I just get a clarification of how much vertical section we're talking about here?
Yeah, and I think you picked up on something that I actually noted as we were talking through this, that there was a graphic error. So we have about 3 to 4 meters of grade change between the plaza space and high lake level. So that was just a graphical error.
In the drawn sections?
Yeah.
So there is more vertical elevation than those drawings suggested? That's correct. Thank you. And then the last thing is I just wondered why, this may be more of a comment, but in your context drawings, Herb, you showed the kind of easy connection for servicing from the corner of Trinity, the curve on Trinity, and the Pavilion, whereas the architectural drawings seem to show the service access as being all the way around the southwest corner of the building. It's just a question as to efficiency there, that's all.
Yes, and to clarify that, that diagram was really just trying to depict how you would get to the hallway path. So the hallway path, that main pedestrian spine, services all service for the entire park system. So all waste collection and other uses feed off of that. So the point of getting to the hallway path was off that corner of Trinity, and I think that graphic could be clarified a bit as well.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, George. I think I'll go back and forth between our guests online and those of us that are here. I wondered, Bridget, are you there?
You muted.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you have questions, Bridget?
Yeah, I had one. I want to follow up from George's clarification question about the winter garden. So will we be seeing that as a kind of issues ID at some point? Or like, I guess, what's the phasing and timing between these two elements that are right across from each other? Who's designing it? Like, how does that fit into the bigger picture?
So we are presenting today both the pavilion and the space adjacent to the pavilion, the winter garden, as issues identification. MVDA is leading the efforts for both pieces along with LGA.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bridget. Eric?
A couple of questions. I have three questions. One is just regarding the kind of the kitchen. What's the commercial aspiration of that facility? Is it something where there's it's like a small restaurant? Because I've noticed the reference to what they have at the Brickworks. Is it something that's going to be a commercial aspiration? You know, it's going to be all year throughout. Is it something that's more? There are some you reserve and you have something. Like, what is, just kind of trying to understand that part of the program.
Herb, do you want me to jump in and take this, and then you can add on? I think the thinking is it is a restaurant. It is ideally year round. We have retained a restaurant consultant, FS Strategies, to advise us on whether there is a feasible business plan for a year-round restaurant within this context. They have identified that at this point, it is a feasible endeavor. And they say in the summer it would be almost too popular, and it may need to be accompanied by more than that in order to be successful, because it may be so busy that it will be counterproductive. So it is intended to be a seated restaurant with an exterior. I mean, the concept of the winter garden, and whether it's the right name or not, you know, is something we can take back, is that it would allow for spill out from the pavilion for the program that's been identified for it.
And what is the elevation? So between the ground floor of the pavilion and the Trinity, what is the level difference? I'm just trying to understand the level of visibility that may exist from, you know, because if it's a commercial buildings, how much visibility does it have? Is it, because, you know, what you're doing is doing a very good job at trying to actually hide it completely in the landscape. So I'm just trying to understand the kind of relationship with its surrounding.
Drew, do you want to go back to your section and talk about?
Do you have one from Trinity to the cafe?
Well, the model was showing that view.
It looks like is it flat?
Oh, there you are. Same level.
It is relatively flat. That's correct. So we have roughly a 4% slope down. There's no need for stairs along that path. I think grade change is less than a meter roughly. It's not a significant change.
Okay. And the service then, given that it's going to be kind of a commercial, kind of a commercial pavilion, how much the servicing then, you know, bringing your truck for garbage or bringing the food, the supply, it's from that red line that we saw, or does it come from Trinity and then come directly to the building?
It would come, Drew, if you could go to the circulation plan, it would come from Trinity. And then it would use one of those main arterial connections through the park. And the one that was noted in the diagram showed a blue line. It would come in until it hits the main hallway path, the main park path at that point.
Okay.
And then that follows main circulation that other servicing would be providing for the park.
And one last question. I saw in one of the previous graphics that and you have to let me know if it's correct. It looks like there is the area for an indigenous art piece in that general location, but I'm not sure if it's part of the Winter Garden, or is it part of the pavilion, or is it somewhere adjacent to it?
That is, it's has not been determined at this point. There's going to be art integrated within this project component, Pavilion and Winter Garden, and there is also going to be an indigenous design component. So at Issues ID, we're not bringing forward what that feature may be, but this area has been designated as a location that will have those elements within it.
Okay, well, as part of my comments, it will be obviously something to bring as early as possible and then really integrated with that process, with the process.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, I'll go back to our guests. Pat, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
One quick question. There are some, it looks like a set of stairs in the kind of hollow area where the washroom doors are. Is that just to get up to the playground, or is that meant as a kind of mini amphitheater, or what is the thinking behind those fairly significant, generous stairs?
Yes, I'll do that briefly. Sorry, there's a little background. As Drew noted, there's washrooms planned for that that western face of the building. So that park queuing space is also anticipating that there will be some type of gathering area for school groups or families off to the side, because there'll be a significant amount of traffic going in and out of that face of the building. There might be multiple uses for that, but that's primarily the generous kind of staired approach that shows up in this concept diagram.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Fatty.
I also had some similar questions about the Winter Garden, but I'll save those for later. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about the overhang and the canopy and how far it intrudes out into the Winter Garden, and if there's a decision, kind of particular specific decision-making process for that canopy, and how little or how much it covers the garden space.
Thanks, yeah. Sorry, it's just going back one more slide here. And it's frozen. Right now, what we're looking at in particular, we're starting to do some modeling, and we're really excited to kind of continue with it. But what we're looking at doing is looking at how we can use the solar condition as the building wraps from the kind of east to the south to the southwest condition, and look at what opportunities there are to have the exposure and self-shading of the building drive large parts of that, while also kind of balancing that with just specifically how far it goes out, how that starts to contribute to a place of refuge, where in the middle of the summer, if it starts pouring rain, people can kind of successfully gather underneath it, as well as creating a condition that is that does create a kind of intimate dining space at the edge. So I think there's a lot of kind of interesting opportunities to push-pull that we're exploring. At the moment, it's going out about 10 feet or so, and I think that's something that's a bit indeterminate to go as we go forward.
And just one other really quick clarification. So just to understand correctly, there's one side that has stairs coming down on it, and the other side is a soft ramp. Are you saying that there's no stairs on either side of the building, or will there? Because that was an error in the section drawing. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So the south side the west side that has the stairs, the washrooms, has a set of very generous stairs, and what looks like on the east side of the building is a soft slope with a path coming down it. Is that accurate? Or is it both stairs, or is there no stairs, or is there both slopes?
There is. Sorry, go ahead, Drew.
No, go ahead, Drew. You got it.
I was just gonna say there is a sloped access path on both the top side here, so right there it wraps around, and then here on the south side there is a pathway that goes around as well. So there's sloped accessible routes on both sides, as well as the stairs here that Pat was asking about in the southwest corner.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Gina, are you there? Yeah. Questions?
I am. Hi. I have two, actually. One is, I'm sorry, I have a cold, but we've learned a lot about the environmental approach to the building and the sort of passive and active strategies. I wondered if you could talk a little bit specifically about sustainability strategies related to the landscape around this facility. And maybe just a little bit more, I think we all have questions about the term winter garden. So just wondering what distinguishes it from a dining terrace, or if it's really intended to be a dining terrace, or if there's other program you're envisioning.
All right, so I'll start with the sustainability question first. So the landscape approach dovetails with the approach that's been set forward with the entire PLFP project. So we are delivering a clean cap over contaminated soil. So as part of the approach of the siting in the building and the elevation selected by the building was how we could maximize soil volume throughout Promontory Park South. And that included the landform behind the building. So that helped programmatically to extend landscape space on top of the building, but also to retain as much soil volume on the project site as possible. From thinking about the planting approach and how that plugs in as much as possible throughout the entire PLFP project, we're extending that forest frame. So looking at native indigenous plantings and recreating as much habitat and significant contiguous areas as possible. That the planting approach that is throughout Promontory Park South will certainly continue that character through it. And the winter garden, this plaza garden space, is that it's been described at the moment. So there is a lot of hardscape there, whether it's pervious, that's still looked at as we back schematic design patient. We'll be looking to see how that plugs into the bigger approach within surfaces of the project, using selection materials. Going back to, I think, the winter garden comment, we certainly look at what is space named. I think what is important from a conceptual standpoint is that programmatically we are looking for this to be that kind of launching point, that threshold into the park for winter activities. So extending use into this plaza space is really key, whether there's fire pits, there's seasonal light displays, the programming that can be serviced by having close proximity to this pavilion that has not only the restaurant cafe component, but also a significant community room, which I didn't note when I was describing the Fire Hall 30 building previously, where we don't have a community room space such as this to really support activities that be focused on having year-round engagement with the park. So I think that's what's lending to our interest in having winter programming really be focused coming out of this corner of the bigger Portland park system.
Okay. Let's go back to the panel. David?
Yeah, just a kind of mundane question in some ways, but how do you imagine people are going to arrive here, and from what direction are they kind of entering the site? Like I'm thinking of the Leslie Street Spit, where a lot of people arrive by car, sadly, but that's certainly the case today. And there's there's several ways to enter that park, but I'm assuming that similarly in the early years, at least, people will be arriving by car and parking somewhere, and they'll potentially be arriving by transit on Cherry Street sometime in the maybe not too distant future. But are you expecting people to, where will they come from? How will they enter this part of the park?
That's a great question. And maybe, Drew, if you could go back to the circulation plan. There will, in the future, beyond 2024, there will be a significant amount of people that we would anticipate are arriving on public transit, as well as the multi-use bike trail, as well as by foot because of the adjacent neighborhoods. And there are opportunities at that point in time within adjacent neighborhoods to have parking garages associated with those buildings that are either along Trinity or Center Street or the other streets to service some of the vehicular parking demand. I can't speak to vehicular parking in 2024, and that might be something Waterfront Toronto wants to mention. But we certainly believe that people will be coming down off of the corner of Cherry and Commissioners and entering by foot through the area on plan identified as the entry plaza, either staying along the orange line to the north, as we haven't constructed the pink of future Trinity Boulevard, or most likely coming down to the red solid line of the main hallway path and then approaching on foot really on the kind of the south side of the park pavilion, so less likely what future arrival would be to the project site.
Maybe I can just jump in on the topic of interim parking. We are studying opportunities for interim parking, post 2024 opening date. One of the sites being considered is the one that we see here on the drawing, the site between Cherry and Trinity. So the same description that Herb just spoke to in terms of access would apply from an interim parking perspective.
Okay, let's keep going. Betsy, are you there? Any questions?
Yes, I am. Yeah, can you hear me, Paul?
Yeah.
I can. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Two kind of main things. One is that commercial kitchens are often sized to the kind of food being served and the price point. This kitchen, in terms of right-sizing the program for the pavilion, seems large relative to the dining area. So I'm going to ask both questions and then mute myself because I'm remote. So what kind of flexibility do you have in the building if this kitchen simply becomes a small cafe versus the one you have planned with like Cafe Belong is kind of an upscale dining experience that's kind of a high price point experience. The other second part two of the question is, are the program area and dining and service areas going to typically be locked if they are not in use? I know that a lot of our park pavilions, unfortunately, are locked when they're not in programming mode, which means that there is no opportunity for shelter or an indoor place to sit. Also, Cafe Belong is essentially closed for occupation unless you're eating there. Or right now it's been closed all during COVID and you can only get a coffee there. So those are kind of two questions related to the program area and the kitchen. My third question is kind of a more architectural question about the use of daylighting to all those back of house spaces, and have you started to look at puncturing through the green roof in order to get natural daylight everywhere in the building?
I think that in terms of the flexibility of the kitchen spaces, one of the things that has been discussed and is an opportunity that's going to be explored further is the opportunity for additional concessions outside of the building. So the ability to expand the kitchen offerings that way, so that there is perhaps the potential of multiple vendors at different points in the year. To supplement. I know that the food FS strategies has been working and worked very diligently to think through the opportunities and what the different types of kitchen environments would offer. With the elimination of certain types of equipment, like gas-fired grills or like things like a deep fryer that are very energy intensive, it will alter the specific offerings. The points on Cafe Belong and what they offer are very well taken, and I think that's something we do need to think about further and work with FS strategies on. Operationally, the footprint here, I'm just going to switch ahead a bit. So there is a sorry, the slides are going slow here. There is an examination here of opportunities to start to think about how we can open and close different parts of the space and separate them at different times of the day or while different programs are occurring. And I think that's a study that does need to continue to advance in the next stages of work, and come back with a kind of clearer picture. And in terms of the daylight to the back of house spaces, there's a number of spaces that I don't think would need daylight, but certainly places like the kitchen or the washrooms or things like that, it is quite a logical extension to start to think about things like light wells or solar tube type skylights in those locations.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. Matthew, any questions?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the presentation. And I wanted to commend you on your Indigenous consultation work that's been done so far. What I was wondering if you'd be able to elaborate on that consultation, specifically who was consulted and how they were consulted, or the processes that you went through.
Sure, I can speak a bit more to that, and we can certainly get you additional detail offline. Like a very, you're looking for a quick bit out of that one. And we've been working with Mino Kimik Collective is our consultant that has been leading that process of Indigenous community engagement. That has happened over the last, I guess, year and a half at this point. And through that effort, we've reached out to the various Indigenous groups and communities that have been involved in the Jordan-Lands naturalization process, the EA, the other efforts that have preceded really this work that we're talking about here today. The Mississaugas Credit First Nation has been the stakeholder at all of the consultation meetings, a partner as part of this process. And through the feedback, we've delivered a summary of all of the input that we've received. And that has been what has informed some of the elements that were identified in the diagram and will be continuing to develop moving forward. There is, and I guess maybe I'll leave this to Pina if we can describe further the next step of that process.
Yeah, so I think what that consultation led us to was a vision plan or a approaches plan. I think that's the plan that was included in the slide deck that everyone received. The next step is to, each of those has a little bit of a different path, but a series of them require us to bring on additional design expertise to support the delivery of those approaches. And so one of the next steps will be to, together with Minokamik and MCFN, issue a request for proposals for bringing on design expertise to help deliver on some of those components. Things like the planting, for example, Minokamik is working directly with MVVA, so that isn't one of the items that would be included in the RFP, but several of the components do require that we bring on more expertise. And that is planned for this year, 2022, that we'll have that underway.
Maybe just a quick follow-up question. Do you know, and maybe you don't know this, have any of the kind of local Indigenous groups or service providers been included in those consultations?
We can send you a complete list. It was a two-part exercise. The first part was to engage with, as Herb said, many of the stakeholders who were involved throughout the planning process for Portland's flood protection. And then we actually undertook a little bit of a deeper dive with urban Indigenous groups focused on the topic of family and children to support the destination playground and this pavilion work.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. I just have Kevin and Jeff left. I'm not sure. Kevin, are you still there?
I think Kevin
had to leave.
Step off the call.
Okay, Jeff, are you there?
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Okay. Go ahead, any questions?
Just one quick question about fences. Obviously, you've got a patio there. We've got issues of licensing. And then with the playgrounds as well, I'm wondering if there's any thought of having those being, fenced and gated, particularly little kid playgrounds, given just how big they are and proximity to the water.
You've touched on something that we'll certainly be talking more in subsequent meetings. There's a lot of conversation and different feedback relative to fences, whether we have, first of all, fences within the playground, and that's something we're going to continue to work with the Parks Department on, is defining a position for the approach of the playground itself. It's probably notable that there is a significant amount of planting anywhere on this project between the user and the water, with exception of the moments where it's really about water access and getting down. However, it's a consideration that we'll be talking more with the client, PF&R, about. And then similarly, I think that's finding that balance within the plaza space, the winter garden space itself, is going to be important to understand as we advance relative to licensing alcohol or other reasons why part of that might be programmed off and separated.
Okay, Jeff?
Yep, thanks,
All right. I think that's everyone with questions, so let's move to comments. It's 10 after 3. We're trying to wrap this part up by 3:30, but we were going to break at 3:45, so let's say we can go to there. And I think I'm going to start with Betsy. You are furthest away, and given the time difference where you are, or perhaps you might want to kick this off.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. It's really lovely to see this pavilion coming together because it's going to be such a great amenity. I have kind of two buckets of comments. One is relative to the discussion around the winter garden. I'm going to keep my comments relative to what are the functions, pavilion functions, or say the architectural functions that should be cleared of snow and operative all winter long. And so that list for me is water fountains, like drinking fountains and water bottle fillers, the bathrooms, bike parking, and some outdoor seating. So understanding and your relationship with who is maintaining the park, that you get snow melt or plowing to allow kind of basic functions to still operate all winter long is hugely important to the use of the park, especially since you have a strong vision for how the park will be used in the winter. My second kind of comment is relative to the architectural idea. So I love the comment that you said about using expressive wood. Even in your diagrams, just sort of notational. The roof is still really thin. It looks like you just have some beams in. I really want you to forward your next presentation with a really strong architectural idea. My hesitation with how this is coming together is this really deep landscape section that you have. It's a no-brainer that you start to punch through it with some architectural elements to get light into every single room in the building. There's no reason why you should have to turn a light on in this building, given its kind of green agenda at any time during the year. Maybe that will help spark some idea that can be carried through, so it's not just a wall of glass with landscape on the top. I mean, I think that would be quite an unfortunate resolution for this pavilion. So full steam ahead. It's really encouraging, all this discussion, and I look forward to your next presentation. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Betsy. Go back and forth here. George, do you want to go next?
I only, given that the question session was so extensive, I mean, I think most of the issues that were of concern to me have been covered. I just, the more I hear about this, well, today we're focusing on the pavilion, but of course the context for it is the park. I was very struck by Pina's comment to the effect that the restaurant consultants were fearful that this facility might, in the summer, might even be too popular. I find myself thinking that concern might be considered to extend to more of the park than just the pavilion. And I just leave that with you for further. I mean, I was trying to think what, I mean, someone brought up the parking question, which is, of course, you know, a thorny one, and of course, it's true, it's also a moving target. But it also, for me, has to do with things like the widths of the path system. And I took it, by the way, from our visit. Chris and I went to the destination playground in Millennium Park in Chicago, and as I recall, the different components of it are fenced, mainly simply for crowd control reasons, was my impression.
Some of them were. I mean, her would probably know better. I'm not sure.
Okay. Anyway, it just seems to me there's we talked about crowd control in respect to the large open lawn in earlier discussions, but I find myself thinking crowd control may be an issue which would merit further reflection here, because I think we could, I mean, I may not be alive then, but I think we could all be embarrassed by the overwhelmingly problematic success of this whole park system.
Okay. Thanks, George. Let's go back. Bridget?
Yep, hello. So first of all, thank you for a wonderful presentation. It's such an important project, and what happens is it works at a neighborhood scale, a City of Toronto scale, and a regional scale all at the same time. So in a way, it's, you know, this kind of issue of crowds and, you know, what's going to happen in the future is a really important question. And I just feel like the kind of figuring that out is kind of key to the long-term success of the project. I feel like for me, the winter garden, I would love to see winter drawings and images that actually depict it in that season, because at this point for me, it's probably the fuzziest part of the whole presentation. And I don't really have a handle on how this outdoor dining and rest area space will actually really be inhabited through the winter. And then I think the issue of winter garden and hallway for me are kind of areas of nomenclature that maybe are I guess I'm wondering whether they really reflect what's really going on, and maybe something to think about in the future. I really appreciate the roofscape of the project, where it becomes a kind of inhabited roof. And in the early study models, clearly they're kind of conceptual, but the issues of railings and balustrades, when you actually have a kind of like a kind of overhang like that, is really key. They all have to meet, you know, building requirements, railings, and can actually look really awful. And so I just think it's an area that will require some design skill, which I know the group really has. I also know that the issue of mass timber construction, when you actually have a roof, a habitable roof on top of it, will also create depth to width ratios that I think you want to be really careful about, because the model has a lightness and an airiness to it that I think you want to retain, and those kinds of combinations and thicknesses are really tricky with mass timber. I also think that one of the issues when we're especially looking at this plan is there's actually no back of house. So by pushing it into the ground, you actually gain in effect the possibility of the roofscape being inhabited, but there's nowhere for recycling, garbage, any of that stuff. And maybe there's a kind of nearby location for in effect the success of the restaurant venue. And then I just think Pina's point that was raised about, being too busy. When I look at the kind of the central lawn and this idea of so there's kind of so many different times of the year that you want this building to be successful for. And so the question of can it make it through the winter is one question, but can it deal with the huge crowds that would happen when there's a big concert or event on the central lawn? And so I would say you really need to push your consultants to really think through the issues of the kind of huge summer events, small dwindling winter things, and how to make sure that you have the right support in terms of whether it's food trucks or ancillary kind of things to really ensure a kind of year-round success in different ways. And I feel like that is a really, because there's no precedent for it, it becomes really tricky. But I think the comment that was made about it, the potential for it being too successful and how to build that all in is really key. I know that they're doing work on High Park right now, partly because of its success, but also having so many different users and how to address the kind of range of people coming. So, but I feel like it's a great project. It's off to an amazing start, and that we really need these kinds of ambitious public realm projects that are really commensurate with the scale of the huge amount of development that's happening in the city. So really can't wait to see it happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. Fatty?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm also thinking about, there's these two restaurants in Ashbridges Bay that were recently renovated, have become so insanely popular all summer that you can never even get a table. And then there's the pavilions on the West Island in Ontario Place, the Modular Village. And if any of you been there during the winter festivals, when one of the pavilions turned into a cafe / restaurant / hot dog stand / beer and cider dispensary, the lineups are huge, even into the middle, of 9 p.m. in Ontario Place, and this is not even as close to being popular and protected as this park will be. So, I mean, I think the rationale of this place being a year-round attraction and the need to have these types of amenities in large parks is really, really important. So I just want to reiterate the excitement for it. In terms of design, I think, again, not to harp on too much on this idea of a winter garden, but maybe this idea is more of a plaza, which is what the Modular Village has in Ontario Place, where they put up 4 or 5 fire pits, they put up the lighting, and it becomes this extension of the plaza inside, and it's pretty multi-seasonal. So maybe the canopy itself is your major design hinge, the thing that could help this place be sheltered year-round from both sun, shade, rain, and also can address some of Betsy's concerns about snow, right? So if some portions of this is year-round covered and snow doesn't really get into all of those spots, maybe this canopy could also be one of your sustainability tools for water collection, passive cooling, etc. So I think further articulation and thinking about that structure as both helping the design of the building, but also the programming of this winter plaza could be thought of a little bit more. And then just one really last thing about the potential of the stairs. Definitely accessibility ramps as much as possible, wherever possible. I also think the stairs is going to be a place where people would gather and sit and families sit on. So it could be another potential seating area, an additional one that links up the playgrounds, the spaces above with the programs and activities happening in the pavilion. So not thinking of them as an afterthought, but really as part of the programming and seating spaces. But really exciting, and I look forward to seeing the next phase of this.
Okay, thanks, Patty. Let's go back to the guests here. Gina.
Hi, everyone. And yeah, hey, I think a lot's already been said, so I'll just say that I know a large part of what we're talking about here is really exciting momentum behind this project too, and getting people on board and, you know, just getting people excited about it. So I think that all of the design strategies that have been talked about feel right on, and I really, really, really appreciate so much of the larger scale framing of this problem and programming ideas and all of it. But I wonder if there's just something that you could do within this work that starts to summarize some of the benefits more explicitly, you know, really talk about those ecological principles and how they land even at this small scale, the health and wellness benefits, the little legs and kids running around, and some of the programming metrics. I just think some of that could really help to sort of make a case for how important this is. And I think there's a lot there that's sort of undersold in some ways just by focusing so much on the design strategy, which is lovely. So that's all I'd offer.
Okay, thanks. Eric?
Yep. A few comments. One is on the, I think that, understanding that, the restaurant actually, because I like the idea of having that use there. I think that, as Pina mentioned, it probably is something that is going to be very popular. I think, so thinking about logistically, how do truck gets there? How do things, like how do you service it? I think George mentioned, is the waste area where you're going to bring a pickup truck to, is it in the right place? So I think just understanding the, kind of the really much the nuts and bolts of the logistic of such an operation is quite tricky. And I think that the idea of the, accessibility, where's your accessible drop-off pickup? Is it in the right place? The visibility of the pavilion is also, I think, quite something that is intriguing. Right now, a lot of it is about trying to hide it and camouflage it, merge it with the landscape. And I think it's a very interesting strategy, but is it enough? Especially when I'm thinking that the roof, as I was mentioning, there's probably going to be some mechanical equipment. You may want to bring some light through. There's going to be some handrail because it's adjacent to the playground. How can this maybe, is there a way to maybe elevate its nature from maybe increasing the visibility? I'm thinking that Betsy mentioned an area for shades and all that. Could there be, for example, on the top of that terrace, a place where maybe there is another structure that is act as a shelter for adjacent to the playground? You come in here, it gets really just like over the weekend, the sun gets amazingly hot. So having places that maybe the roof, right now it's shown as a seating area that is maybe, how do you differentiate them? It's at a lookout, but could there be something else as part of a program that, makes it slightly different? I'm thinking when it rains or when it's hot, is there a place where you can shelter yourself? I like the canopy that you're proposing on the lower section, but that is also probably going to be more privatized in terms of the relationship to the dining area. So I think that's something that is worth to continue to explore. The sense, to me, the sense of there was a point that was made earlier and about the sense of approach. As you approach from Trinity, what you see, I think that's going to be, it's something quite crucial. I'd like to see in the next time a little bit more like what I'm missing is a little bit of the immediate context, like how does it relate to the road, to a little bit to the, to the right, to the left, to the south. Understanding the topography is just like I found that we saw it at a really, really large picture, but I think we need to also bring in that in between years just to understand the relationship between each of the elements. I think I talked about the roof, that maybe it can be something else. I mean, I think that the nature of the pavilions, its visibility, it's something that I've been thinking about, and it's just food for thought. I think it needs to be a little bit more visible. I think it needs to be something that enhance, like it's a sense of a marker in the landscape. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, the idea that how that will in the next stage, the integration with the indigenous arts, that kind of the process, I think is I look forward to see how that continues to evolve. And I think a last point was that the indoor and the outdoor, the winter dining area. I mean, I see that if this becomes extremely popular, I could just see like in the summer, the entire area becomes a beer terrace or whatever. So I think it's just understanding the nature of how much of that exterior is actually linked to the buildings. And then also, maybe it's not throughout the year. Maybe it's like
I
in
think
the
it
winter.
needs to expand and contract.
I think
kind
it
of
needs.
the sense I'm getting.
Exactly. I think understanding that, because in December it will be something different, but in the summer I could see that you'll fence the north part, you'll fence the south part, and then it's probably
The whole thing is
the whole thing, because frankly you're going to be, and there's probably going to be an exterior serving area potentially. So I think spending a bit more time on understanding what that program is critical.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Let's see, Pat.
Thanks. I think that all those comments about the sort of function and size of the building and the service area I won't get into, and just focus on a couple of sort of more formal questions about the architecture. I really appreciated the presentation, particularly the architectural portion. And I quite appreciate the idea of the embedded building, and the simplicity of that and the kind of modesty of that, I think, is that it's quiet is actually to be commended. So that just means, I think, that you have to ramp up the kind of material component of the building a bit and how it is ultimately delivered architecturally. So I think the real opportunity here, or the one, is the kind of integration of the landscape and the architecture, and where the two meet in this building is at the retaining wall and the perimeter, the solid perimeter of the building. So it's good that this drawing is in front of us. I think, the kind of curvature of the dining and service area, the kind of same thinking could be taken into how one manipulates the retaining walls to the top of the drawing and to the south of the drawing. Is there a kind of smoothness there? Is it a different material? Well, big question. Is it a similar material that finds its way as a solid cladding of the building that can also, be continuous and be part of the retaining of the landscape? I think there's some huge opportunities there. And so whether that probably isn't stone, but is there a way of using mass timber as retaining walls? I think the idea of kind of amping up the kind of material or how this is constructed in an unusual way that could really start to frame this building, even for fundraising, about how its identity is really quite different, is a huge opportunity. So just to reiterate, I think really the architectural identity of this building is partially from the roof, but really comes from how it does sit into the landscape, and how, like in this drawing, we're not seeing the stairs that I was asking about before, but does it start to make these kind of other little enclosures or niches into the landscape so that the two really become one? I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Pat. David?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Polly. I agree with all of the comments that I've heard from panel members so far, so just in support of that. And thanks again for your presentation. I do really appreciate the focus on regeneration and resiliency, and I know that you're beginning to think about how all of that is integrated into the building and obviously the landscape, and how that's expressed as well through materiality and the various design elements. So I think there's some real real kind of strong basis for the design expression there. I started off by asking the question about the interim access to the site because I know that, for example, at the Brickworks, that's been a constant issue for Jeff Cape and his team at Evergreen. Brickworks is a challenging site to access, and there's been constant issues of cycling access, getting access to the Dawn Trail and that kind of thing, how to get enough cars in there. So I do think it's important to consider that interim interim condition and to think about how people will arrive at the site, where they'll come from, and how they'll get there. And I do think that as well that the pavilion, in a way, that pavilion and winter garden space, when I look at the plan, it is a kind of hinge point. There's a large playground to the north, the one to the east. There are kind of larger land masses on either side, and so I think people will be attracted to this point as a kind of meeting place because meet me at the pavilion. It seems like a logical kind of destination. It'll be the place that people go, and yet it's the narrowest kind of part of the plan, and I think that there's going to be a lot of congestion around it. And I think people will hang out here. So it's not only about kind of the restaurant supporting all of that commercial function, but I think it's about supporting this as a destination in itself and the public spaces around it. And I think as part of that, you should be thinking about, and I'm sure you will be, MVVA or masters at this, is that kind of integration of the social infrastructure that's permanent here. The big seating areas for lots of people to sit and gather, around this dining area, around the winter garden all year long. As was mentioned earlier, the drinking fountains, maybe there's heating stations somehow integrated into all of this. But I do think it's just such a critical moment. And congratulations to the team so far. I look forward to seeing the next round of presentations. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Jeff, are you still there? Looks like it, but.
Yeah, Paul. Hey,
Jeff,
sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, my comments, congratulations to Drew and the team on all this sustainability stuff that you guys are trying to do. I mean, I think I've heard, I heard a lot of biophilia referenced. I heard a lot of, passive design strategies, low carbon design, embodied carbon. So there's a ton of good stuff you're looking at. I guess my only comment on the operational side of the building is, I wouldn't be killing yourself over passive house certification. It's a bit of an odd building type for this, and you think there's going to be a ton of, activity in and out. It's not a building where people are sort of sheltering in place, where I think you're really emphasizing the, super insulated enclosure. I envision something that, shoulder seasons, maybe it's more open air. You've got more adaptive dynamic systems, glazing that opens up. So just, I just think about that, and sometimes passive house can be a bit, dogmatic and prescriptive about things like that. So, but I mean, there's a ton there. I'd be just focused on just carbon as the raw number, and what does that look like? Lots of good stuff around even the kitchen design. So you're pulling a lot of things. So yeah, congrats. I look forward to seeing it evolve.
Okay, thank you. And I think Matthew?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to encourage the team to continue their Indigenous consultations, specifically with local Indigenous service providers. I think there's a lot of opportunity to see what they're doing and a lot of programmatic elements that they can add to this pavilion. I mean, just the location next to Canoe Landing, all the plantings that you're doing, and thinking about possibilities of partnering with them as well. While these plants that are proposed do need care, either from a medicinal point of view or just from a harvesting point of view. And then also encouraging you to connect with the city as well with regards to their sacred fire locations. This could be an amazing spot to have one of those. So thank you.
Great. I think that covers everyone here and who's online. So I'll do my best to try and summarize the comments, then we'll give you an opportunity to respond. I guess I'll start with just saying that obviously we all think this is a unique and wonderful opportunity, and the work done so far is very impressive, and we look forward to the elaboration of all the details that you've heard. And I guess I wanted to just start by reminding people that I think the build out for Villiers Island is 25,000 people, give or take, living and working there. So there's going to be a huge local population, as well as people coming from different parts of the city to this facility. And I think that underscores a couple of things. One, about lessons learned about experiences with Ontario Place, eating facilities in Hyde Park, et cetera, et cetera. I think this place is going to be incredibly popular, both in the summer for obvious reasons, but I think also the winter. It's going to be kind of a unique place. And that then leads us, I think, to a number of the comments that were made about the nature, and maybe it's the terminology that winter garden is the wrong term to be used here, I'm not sure, but the elaboration of that concept and the clarification of the actual program that's contemplated for the pavilion and the adjacent spaces to make sure that it functions successfully all year round. Someone made the comment that perhaps different seasons, some of these outdoor spaces may grow, may shrink. That flexibility, I think, is needed to be built into the pavilion. Commentary, obviously, about the unique architectural identity of the building sitting into the landscape is pretty obvious. Suggestions about elaboration for the building materials, how to best integrate the timber, mass timber, and stone goes without saying. I think crowd control came up with a number of comments in terms of, especially for large summer events, but perhaps, who knows, maybe even winter festivals, that it's not just unique to the summer. So that has to be thought of. How is this facility and this park going to handle very, very large groups of events and large crowds? And one of the areas that came up too that kind of bothered me was the question of parking, how people are going to get there. And Villiers Island is not going to be built out for a while. And so when this facility and the Promontory Park opens, I could see, and it worries me, all kinds of people just driving down there and parking all over Hell's Half Acre. And how do you break that cycle and that habit? Obviously, getting the LRT running is part and parcel of that. But aside from that, I think a lot of attention has to be devoted to that, because I would really, really be afraid to see Villiers Island become a parking lot before it got developed, because there's so many people who want to go to this. So I think a lot more attention is needed to think about those questions. More detailed drawings have been requested for a whole bunch of reasons. One, I think, is very important to look at the context and relationship of the pavilion to the immediate neighborhood in Trinity Street, and so we can understand better that relationship. I think that'd be very helpful in the next iteration. A lot of questions about restaurant, logistics, the type, the size, the year-round availability, the servicing, the sustainability, for the actual canopy, passive house, et cetera, and details that need to be thought of in terms of railings around the roof, areas for, meet building code requirements, how that's going to be integrated successfully, whole range of details that obviously are yet to come. And a very strong plea to continue consultation with local indigenous community, and the comment was made about sacred fire locations. Right? I could see this a phenomenal place for fire pits, just given the location of it, looking back to the city. I mean, it'd just be spectacular. And I guess one other general overall comment about it would be helpful, because this is going to be such a uniquely ecological facility, to clarify those ecological benefits as people come there and gradually start to discover this and learn about why all this has been done and why it's coming together and how it's going to work and how it relates. I could see this facility, and I think we will all be alive to see it, which is the good news, being just so welcome in the city, both from a citywide perspective, a neighbor perspective, and perhaps international perspective for the reasons that we've talked about for so long. So I think, we all like what we see. We hope that we'll see more detail and that those kinds of issues and questions that you've heard here have answers as it evolves and comes back to us as soon as possible. So I think that tries to capture the general themes that we've heard here, and maybe I'll go to you, Herb, give you an opportunity to respond.
Well, I guess on behalf of the MBDA team, thank you. The comments discussion have been very thoughtful and certainly helpful. And I guess we're very much looking forward to coming back with more detail on some of these items. As we hinted on, we've certainly thinking about a lot of these and are excited to share them at the meeting to follow.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I guess that concludes this item. And how are we doing here? About 1:45? You want to take a 5-minute break, or if people want to, yeah? Okay. So it's 1:45, let's come back in 5 minutes and we'll wrap it up. So just to make it official, we have adjourned the public session.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
And we are now going into camera.